Welcome to another edition of Whaling City Ghosts Presents, and we have a special show for you this month. It's actually in the Hockomock Swamp, the dwelling place of the spirits. The Hockomock Swamp itself is a place that is ancient. We're talking really ancient. The bedrock below it is 650 million years old, which most of Massachusetts has a granite bedrock under it. And that's part of what we think affects a lot of our haunts. The granite we have was really high quality, and that's why there were so many quarries back in the day, because it had a lot of crystal quartz in it. And we've said it probably a few times on the shows that crystal quartz can help a haunt because a crystal quartz is believed to store energy. So that's an interesting fact about the Hockomock Swamp. It goes back ages, and it's actually been wiped out by the ice ages and reformed because of that bedrock below it. The water just can't seep out. So in some places, the peat there is like 40 feet deep, and the trees are growing out of this. Had a great time out there in the Hockomock Swamp that night. I think you'll see a few things that are a little bit different from our usual investigation. The biggest one of them is that we were actually using cell phones that night. That's not something that we normally do on investigation, but on this particular investigation, we were helping a local radio show do a Bridgewater Triangle special. So we were interacting with the radio show. The cell phones were necessary that night. We really couldn't use a lot of our instruments. We were actually under power lines, so that would have kicked off everything we owned. I just finished setting up. We get some infrared cameras going. EMF is useless out here because we've got some power lines overhead, but this is an active spot, so we want to be here. And we've got a pretty high background radiation, and we're going to watch for that to drop off. And you picking up on anything yet?
Well, just a little bit. I keep getting stuff from over in there, but I'm really curious to see if the guy that we heard about actually starts to climb the tower again. But no. The eeriness is actually coming from behind us. So I have the really good full spectrum camera going that way, and then I have the other the infrared this way, the full spectrum that way, and then we have the black light and the other equipment going. So hopefully we catch something tonight.
Yeah, that was interesting because the reason we come to this spot usually when we come out to the Hockomock Swamp is because Matt Chico, who's usually with us as the investigator, he was out here with another group, and they actually captured a picture of an apparition climbing the tower that we're actually under right now. In 1970, there was some trappers out in the Hockomock Swamp, and they found a bunch of old canoes. They were dugout canoes that were flat on one end, and when they examined these, they thought that they were at least 500 years old and were probably older. During the course of the night, I was, as usual, recording EVP, and I had my headphones on, and I kept hearing what I thought was a little girl, and because of that, I kept sort of wandering off to the area where I heard the voice. What happened for Sue and Maria was very exciting for them, and I'm so sorry that I missed it. I did have my own little thing happen anyways. The two of them were over towards the power line. First, Sue saw what looked like a dark, shadowy apparition move near the power lines, and then shortly after that, Maria saw what seemed to probably be the same apparition in a different location. Unfortunately, the location of the apparition was not in any of our camera's view, so we didn't actually capture it, but it's a great personal experience that they had. Later, when I went over the evidence that we had collected that night, I did find that I had heard a little girl. As I suspected and wasn't sure about at the time, there were actually two different female voices, as you'll see when we play some of the EVP. This month, everybody's sitting down to a holiday meal. It's funny because the Wampanoag have a lot to do with that first Thanksgiving. The word Hockomock actually means the dwelling place of spirits in the Wampanoag tongue. Over the years, as we've investigated the Hockomock Swamp, we've found that to be very much true. There's so much history behind it, not just geologically, but as you see, the name Hockomock is a Wampanoag word. During King Philip's War, it was a great strategic location for them to attack the settlers. Many of the settlers wouldn't go in. They didn't really like it. They had a feeling about it just because of the name. Many of the settlers did know what a lot of the words meant back then. They did have contact with the natives at the time.
With those first two EVPs, you hear the girls that I was talking about that I was hearing in the headphones, and I do love that H2 where you can actually hear the EVPs as they're happening. It sometimes helps us question the spirits, and when you're out there and later on realize that you really were hearing two young girls, a really young one and a slightly older one, it makes you wonder what happened out there. How did these spirits end up out in the middle of the woods? A tiny little girl, as you'll see later in the show, she does sound very tiny, but that first one, I think the 32 is probably her. And then we go on and we have Kiss Me, which sounds older. And then this next one really makes you wonder. It says the girl who was raped. What happened to this girl out there, and is her body still out there?
Oh, baby girl, where are you?
This next one I think is probably the older girl, just because she sounds a little more flippant.
Don't you want to talk anymore? Hockomock Swamp does have a lot of history, and it's also the heart of what's called the Bridgewater Triangle. Maybe some of you don't know about it. The Bridgewater Triangle is actually a huge 200 square mile triangle. It's an area of a lot of paranormal activity. There's things from UFO sightings, Bigfoot sightings. The Hockomock even has its own Bigfoot that they call Hockomock Harry. There have been so many reports, and some of them are even really strange. For instance, there's supposedly a thunderbird out there. This is a huge bird that people have reported seeing that has over a 12-foot wingspan, flies away, and they see it just take off with its legs dragging behind it. There have even been reports of black dogs with evil red eyes, which hopefully we never meet up with any of those when we're out there on investigation. There have even been reports of these huge black snakes that are so big around that they actually called them stovepipe snakes. Men that were out there logging at the time reported these snakes out there, and that's another thing that I hope Whaling City Ghosts doesn't end up ever seeing out there. But that's the kind of reports that have been made out there. You know, whether those are true or not, we are mostly out there for the ghosts.
You don't really get a feel for these woods and how big they actually are until you're out there and it just closes up around you. And think about it this way, the Freetown State Forest is a pretty huge piece of land. There's 5,000 plus acres there. Well, with the Hockomock Swamp that's covering a bunch of towns, it's 16,950 acres of huge woodland swamp. So imagine that, being out there in the darkness with nothing but the trees and the ghosts.
Is it because we're smoking?
No. I heard that. Well, as most of you can probably tell, we are a very scientific team, but I do like to take into account the psychic impressions that the people with us get sometimes, because to me, psychic phenomena is part of the paranormal, and I found over the years with my research that a lot of times the people who are sensitive to that stuff, like I have always been, are more likely to have paranormal activity happen. So one experience that you had was you said that you felt a dead
Like there was
Yeah,
probably
when we
someone
came around
buried.
the tower, as you'll be able to see on the film here and there, the electric tower, and over to this side there was like a rock, and it's like right behind the rock there was like a man buried right in there.
Oh,
and
a man.
A man, and I could have sworn I did get a couple of EVP with male voices on it, but there was a dead body over there. And I literally went over to touch the rock to make sure that it actually wasn't somebody dead there. Because I wanted to make sure we actually started off with ghosts, not dead bodies. So I went over there, took a look, touched the rock first, and then I came back to set up the equipment. But it was just that feel of somebody literally was just dead right there.
I wouldn't be
not
surprised.
Not being covered or anything else.
The first EVP that you heard a few moments ago, no, was a direct response to what we had asked it. And now you're going to hear another male voice, and he seems to be aware. He's telling us his name is Herman, but he whispers, so it's very hard to tell if this is the same man or not.
Now I can see you.
Right. One more car.
Stop. Yeah.
You're like.
One thing that Freetown State Forest and the Hockomock Swamp share is the fact that they're large, deserted land masses in between a lot of cities. Now, we know that in the Freetown State Forest some pretty tragic things happened out there, the satanic cult and many bodies, people shot and killed. The cheerleader that was found tied to a tree, that, those are tragic things. Now, none of those kind of things have been reported in the Hockomock Swamp, but we suspect that there probably have been bodies hidden out there. You have a body of water, well, lots of bodies of water. It's a swamp, and a large tract of land that no one really goes on except for possibly hunters. So the fact that there's probably bodies out there does correlate to the things that we've recorded out there. And a funny thing is that years ago, one of our investigators who previously to being on the team had investigated out there, Mark Pacheco, and he had recorded a woman's voice on quite a few occasions. And one of the EVPs that you'll hear tonight when we play them sounds very similar to the woman that he recorded, and we all kind of suspect that she probably was someone who was murdered and dumped out there along with some of the other spirits.
The next EVP that you're going to hear, I believe, again, is in Way of Spirit. He's introducing his name and himself as "This is Rudy," and the name just sort of makes me wonder a little bit if all of the spirits that we've encountered over the years at the Hockomock Swamp are actually people who died there, or if they're just people that died somewhere in the vicinity of Hockomock Swamp, but maybe there are conditions that exist there that attract the spirits, be it maybe an energy source or something that we haven't discovered yet that helps to bring these spirits there and make them manifest activity. The next EVP that you're going to hear is sort of strange in the tone of it, and it's one of Sue's favorite EVPs, and she definitely wanted to play it for the show. And as you'll hear it, I was actually answering the phone for the local radio show, and I was about to interact with them and tell them about the things that were happening on investigation that night. And as I'm saying hello, you'll hear something whisper very quickly behind my voice, "God, you've got beautiful eyes." And in this particular clip, I gave it an extra loop and slowed it down a little bit because it does speak so fast. But Sue just loves it, and she thinks that it's very, and I agree with her, that it's very dramatic and exciting to get an EVP where you see that a spirit can actually take in so much detail about the world where we, the living, exist, that they can notice that I have blue eyes and comment on it. So, as I hope that you like it as much as Sue does, you'll hear, "God, you've got beautiful eyes."
Hello? 32 viewers.
Hello?
And I apparently can't download it
Yeah?
to your phone.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
one, which one of us, we're not really sure what he's talking about, but it's funny because the way he says the word one is sort of a local accent. If you're from around here, you might recognize it. One thing I've noticed over the years is that we get a lot of requests for help. These next two, one saying help me and the other one saying help me God, again, requests for help. I swear if I had $1 for every time a ghost said that to us, I'd probably be a rich woman. But you wonder, what kind of help can we give them?
Tyler?
I don't know.
And your phone's dying, so you can't call yours, right?
Mine?
Yeah.
Yeah, my phone's dying. It's on to like.
And your
Toward the end of the evening, we were walking down the dirt road that leads along the side of the power lines. And at one point, Sue thought that she heard something behind us. So she was heading back towards the cameras. Maria and I continued to walk away towards the road, and suddenly we just walked into this huge warm spot that was very warm and felt sort of almost wet. You know, the thing was, we were out there on a very dry night, considering we're in New England. It's very rare to have such a low humidity night. And it wasn't warm. We were pretty much bundled up. So to walk into this warm spot, we felt it was sort of strange and looked at each other like, did you feel that? And as we stood there and looked at each other, the warm spot moved away. So we continued down the road a little bit and were suddenly enveloped in this gigantic warm spot. And again, it moved away. And at this point, I looked at Maria and I actually felt a little uncomfortable that maybe if this was something paranormal, that it seemed to be trying to separate us from Susan, who was going back to check the cameras. So because of that, we just actually turned around and went back towards where Susan was so that she was not alone.
In the course of the night, it seems as if we got 3 different male voices, Herman, Ian, and Rudy. And of course, earlier we had recorded the females, which it sounded like there was a very young and a possibly older one that had a little bit of an attitude, it seems. But it makes you wonder, what brought those spirits out there? And if we could actually go out there and dig up the whole Hockomock Swamp, 16,000 acres, and, you know, take it down to the ground, would we find bones out there from all these bodies, all these spirits that we've met over the years? Or would we not find that many? Because is there something that makes the spirits wander out there? Just because it is the Hockomock Swamp, the dwelling place of the spirits. It makes you wonder, though, if you actually could go out there and dig up the Hockomock Swamp, would we find the bones of all these people out there? Or did some of them happen to just wander out there? Because after all, the Hockomock Swamp is the dwelling place of spirits. And as you'll see, that poor little baby out there, will we find a baby's body? But I'll leave you with that question as you hear these next ones, which the first one I heard audibly, and I even asked the girls if they had made a crying sound. And it's just a small little child crying, I think possibly because it was getting frustrated with me, because it knew I was hearing it in the headphones, but I wasn't interacting with it maybe as much as it would have liked. Because after that first baby cry, you'll hear another very young child's voice say the name Sue, as if becoming frustrated with me. She went from me over to Sue and tried her luck. Unfortunately, Sue didn't hear her, but we did record the voices.
There's a full spectrum right there. You can take it right off I'll show you how to work the tripod.
Did somebody go?
No.
I'll take it right.
Yeah. You can take it right off. Yeah. You can take it right off. Yeah. You can take it right off. Flash up.
Read the back.
Stay tuned till the end for the bloopers.
Did you guys hear that? I
What?
heard that knocking noise.
Oh, you did?
Oh, wasn't me stuffing my coffee?
No, it sounded like someone knocking the metal.
Is someone knocking on the metal of the tower? Can you do it again?
Yep.
I hope you enjoyed being with us for season 2, episode 2, and hope to see you again next time because as always, you never know where Whaling City Ghosts is going to end up next. Wild black dogs, big fluff, which they call him Hockomock. Not to step on Shy, we have to be so close. I'm afraid I'm gonna like step on her. You're in my personal space. I'm sorry, I have to be. Saying has over 12. Excuse me. Is that like a motorcycle?
Excuse me. Motorcycles? You're bothering my star.
Yeah, and like, how can you ride a motorcycle tonight?
Calm down, honey. We got to. Go away.
Shuka! We banish you! In the name of all that's good, we banish thee, motorcycle, and I am sinking, man.